of the votes. Jeff Johnson, the Republican candidate, with 36% of the votes.
Pat Kessler's here. Pat, what do you make of those numbers, and what else do you have for us?
Well, these are very early numbers. Not a lot of precincts in quite yet. We've got only about 20% of the precincts reporting. Jeff Johnson is very strong outside the Twin Cities, and it doesn't appear that many of these votes are from there quite yet. We are going to be watching this very closely, but with 20% in, looks like Tim Walz is leading Jeff Johnson. Walz and Johnson crisscross the state, border to border, north to south, east to west, over the last few days. It has been a contentious, vigorous, aggressive campaign by both the Republican Johnson and the Democrat Tim Walz. Walz has been leading throughout all of the polls, an average of about 7, 8, 9%. But Jeff Johnson says he feels something out there. He feels something outside of the Twin Cities, feels something in Minnesota. He is predicting that he's going to pull an upset victory.
Don't you have Wisconsin numbers too, Pat?
We do have Wisconsin numbers. Wisconsin also very, very important. We're following that very closely with about 36% reporting. This is way too close to call. We're looking at numbers here with 31%. Tony Evers, the school chief, the state school superintendent in Wisconsin, is leading, but just barely leading Scott Walker, the two-term governor, who has been very controversial, has embraced President Trump, but has presided over a recovery, an economic recovery in Wisconsin. They have a very low unemployment rate. Tony Evers has been pushing very hard education and also Donald Trump and the tone of the campaign. So we have updates as we go here, and it looks like this race is too close to call. It's 49 to 48% Evers over Walker. We'll follow that real closely.
We'll invite you back over here, and in the meantime, we'll go through some congressional races and see where we're at this point in the evening.
As we said, the numbers are early yet. Still at the 3rd District, with actually 92% of the precincts reporting in. Democrat Dean Phillips with 56% of the votes. Incumbent Republican Eric Paulson with 44%. We want to move on to the House District 2 with 3% reporting in. Democrat Andrew Craig with 60% and Republican Jason Lewis with 40%.
Yeah, early number there.
Yes.
District 1, this is between Jim Hagedorn with 62%, Dan Feehan at 38%, but again, 9% of precincts reporting, which is a low number at this point. And in the District 8 race, which is Duluth and up north, Representative Pete Stauber out of the gate quickly with 56% to Joe Rudinch's 39%. Again, only 14% of the precincts reporting.
And in the 7th District, with only 4% of the precincts reporting in, Republican Dave Hughes with 55%, Democrat Colin Peterson, the incumbent, with 45%. That's only with 4%, of course.
Pat, let's go back to those District 3 numbers, because one, there's 92% reporting.
That's shocking. I think people were expecting Dean Phillips to win. I don't think people expected to be that kind of a margin. Dean Phillips is possibly on the way to a big upset, upsetting the incumbent Republican Congressman Eric Paulson. 56 to 44% right now. We're going to be talking about that all night long.
Yeah, we definitely will.
And when we need to, we'll get out there with a live report.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're going to continue our election coverage on WCCO.com and Facebook right now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back on all our digital platforms. And we have some big news right now when it comes out of the 3rd District for Congress.
CBS is calling Dean Phillips as the winner of this election there. Well, we have 92% of the precincts reporting in, but they're calling Dean Phillips a Democrat, unseating the incumbent Eric Paulson with Dean 56% of the votes and Eric Paulson with 44%. This is big news, right?
Yeah, it really is.
We knew it was going to be a tight race.
We knew that it was going to be a tight race. I think it had been trending toward Dean Phillips for a long time, but there's a lot to unpack here in this race. Number one, Dean Phillips, a Democrat, unseats an incumbent Republican congressman. It is really, really difficult to unseat any congressman who is in office, Republican or Democrat. That's a big deal. Number two, this was an ugly campaign.
Yes.
Also, $18 million as of today was spent here, one of the most expensive congressional campaigns in the entire United States. And Eric Paulson, who has been in office for 10 years, really changed his persona during this campaign. A guy who was thought of as a nice guy, someone who was easy to get along with, and somebody who tried to work across the aisle. In this campaign, became very aggressive, very, very negative. One of the most negative campaigns I think we've ever seen in this state.
And then I think in the last week I found that Dean Phillips, his tone, he was much more the gentler
Everyone's
version.
invited.
Yes.
Was his
Yeah,
statement.
that was his campaign motto. Now, we must say that outside groups, independent expenditure groups, and super PACs came in with both feet, spent millions of dollars on negative ads, both against Eric Paulson, but on behalf of Dean Phillips, too. So this was negative on both sides. Even if Dean Phillips was not negative himself, this is one of these races that the Democrats wanted really badly, and they came in and showed it.
This is one of the races that is being watched nationally.
Absolutely.
One of the 4 districts in our state.
Right. This is one of the ones. So it's a pickup for Democrats, which is a plus if for the Democrats to take control of Congress. They need 23 seats, and this will be one added onto that pile.
Yeah, and not only has Paulson been there 10 years, but you go back to when Jim Ramstad had that seat.
It's been decades.
Yes.
1961.
Think about that. Bill Frenzel before him.
Yeah, there hasn't been a DFL candidate that's held that 3rd district since 1961. So
yeah, and so this is something. This is a district that Hillary Clinton won. So there it is.
Eric Paulson actually is speaking right now at the DFL, I'm sorry,
Republican
headquarters.
Thankful for. And it all starts with family. First and foremost, I want to thank my wife, Kelly. Who has had to put up with me serving in elected office, being away from home, and raising our 4 daughters pretty much by herself. So my daughters will get to see their dad a little bit more. Kelly will get to see me a little bit more. Maybe that's not good. But I am very grateful for her support and the support of my entire family. I never could have done this without them. As we know, it all starts with family, and this is a family affair from the start. I also want to thank many of you who are in this room tonight, who have poured in your heart, your time, your energy, your talent in volunteering and offering support over many years. I see a lot of familiar faces in here tonight. I will always remember and be grateful for your friendship. Absolutely. And this includes my team and staff, and I truly have the best team and staff. I really do. Serving the people of the 3rd District day in and day out. Very dedicated folks, putting in endless hours. I want to thank them for their dedication. And I also want to thank Jim Ramstad. Jim Ramstad, who is a mentor and friend of mine for many years. He taught me that by embracing a bipartisan, pragmatic approach to problem solving, you can be very successful as a legislator in being effective in getting things done. But finally, I do want to thank the voters of the 3rd Congressional District for granting me this privilege of serving you in Congress. It's absolutely been one of the highest honors of my life.
Well, that's the concession speech of 5-term congressman from the 3rd District, Eric Paulson. This evening, Dean Phillips is the congressman-elect now from the 3rd.
Yeah, that's history being made tonight in Minnesota's 3rd District. As we mentioned just a moment ago, this has been in Republican hands since 1961.
Yeah.
So that is a remarkable thing, but it has been a really tough and rough campaign here in Minnesota, the likes of which Minnesota really doesn't see that often. A very, very negative campaign for this congressional seat.
And extraordinarily expensive.
Yes.
$18 million. Unbelievable.
I know. Well, we're going to go to the 6th Congressional District because they are calling Tom Emmer as the winner there with 60% of the vote, and Ian Todd with 40% of the vote. That's with 48% or 45% of the precincts reporting in.
This race was called early. Democrat Ilhan Omar over Jennifer Zielinski. Not a big surprise. A very strong margin with 92% reporting at this point. This is not a surprise either. As you look to House District 4, which is St. Paul and the surrounding area, Betty McCollum over Greg Ryan.
And as we just told you, the 3rd District with Dean Phillips, 56% of the vote over incumbent Eric Paulson, 44% of the vote. Another District 2, Representative Jason Lewis, with the incumbent Jason Lewis, 40% of the vote. This is only with 8% or 5% of the precincts reporting. And Democrat Angie Craig with 60%, so that's still pretty early on here.
Very early. District 1, Rochester and southern Minnesota, Jim Hagedorn with a big lead over Dan Feehan. But again, this is very early without a lot of districts reporting. Now we'll go all the way up to northern Minnesota in the 8th Congressional District, where Pete Stauber has a 16% lead with 14% reporting. But again, these are early numbers.
Yes, they are. Then we're going to the 7th District with 5% of the precincts reporting in. Colin Peterson, the incumbent, running behind 49% over Republican Dave Hughes, who has 51% of the vote there.
So, Pat, we see big margins, in the 1st and in the 8th. But again, I don't think we can really extrapolate much out of that because it's so early.
Yeah, you really can't.
And those are geographically huge districts.
Yeah, they're some of the largest districts in the United States, some of the biggest in the United States. So they're bigger than many states, actually. And we have all of the votes coming out of the Twin Cities right now, so we haven't seen them in southern Minnesota. In that race, we're watching pretty closely the 1st District with Dan Feehan and the Republican Jim Hagedorn. Also from the 8th District, which has been trending Republican over the last few months, Pete Stauber versus Joe Radinovich. Those numbers not yet coming in.
That was a little bit of a negative campaign going on there, too.
We'll talk about that tonight, because I think you're right. It was really the outside money especially went for negative campaigning.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
It has been one of the darkest, ugliest campaigns I think I've ever seen here in Minnesota. But all of these votes are coming in from the Twin Cities area, so we don't really have a real good sense about where this is actually going with some of these congressional races.
Can I take you back to the bright side, though, as opposed...
Oh, good. Please do.
Well, I'm just wondering about this, because you've been around this a lot longer than I have. But Dean Phillips ran this campaign saying, I'm not taking PAC money.
Right.
I don't want outside interest. I'm into coffee and conversation. I'm into everyone's invited. The tone of what he did, the outside money was horrible against Paulson.
Right.
But the money that Phillips controlled was relatively upbeat and positive, saying, let's make this a different kind of thing. And I just wonder if people are so fed up with the nasty stuff that it might have worked. I don't know.
I'm going to be real interested after this is over to look at that, because Dean Phillips was unrelentingly positive. He fixed up an old repair truck and drove around the district, had a pontoon boat, wore the red plaid like all the Democrats are doing this year. But he had that everyone's invited, everyone's invited motto, which I think you're right, was very positive.
Was it reminiscent of Paul Wellstone's campaign, do you think, back in the day?
In some ways it was, because Dean Phillips would say, like Paul Wellstone did, what he meant. And he had this commercial, and many of you may have seen it. It's called Bigfoot, looking for Eric Paulson, because one of the slams against Eric Paulson is that he did not hold a public town hall meeting for 7 years. And he had a group in his district that the people were rising up, protesting at every single place that he appeared. They were at his office. They were doing everything they could. So this year, he slammed together 3 town hall meetings within 8 hours and had them all over the state real quickly. And so there it is. And that was part of what I think this distant, removed congressman helped contribute to his defeat.
Let's get to Amy Klobuchar. She has, well, okay, Amy Klobuchar is we're at DFL headquarters. Klobuchar is there. She's getting ready to take the stage. This is a live look right now. She gets a lot of love and support. She won handily this evening. It was actually the first race in Minnesota that all the major news outlets declared. Pat, she is popular.
Yeah, she is, and she ran. She ran kind of above it all, above all of this campaigning. She was here in the state campaigning, but her campaign was above it.
To continue serving as your
And here she is
United
now.
States Senator. I am also honored to have my incredible family up here, John, my rock, and our daughter Abigail that took a day off work to come out for this. She's a little taller than you remember her. I'm looking forward to speaking with Representative Newberger. I appreciate his work as a paramedic. Campaigns are hard work, and I wish him and his family well. It is a big night, and there is a lot happening and a lot more to celebrate. The night is young, but it looks as though, thanks to your hard work and the way we have reached out to every corner of this state, to Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, it looks as though we are going to be sending my good friend and colleague, Tina Smith, back to the Senate. And I am feeling very, very good that our next governor will be Tim Walz. And our next Lieutenant Governor, Peggy Flanagan. And based on what we're seeing across the country, it looks as though the United States House of Representatives will soon be the People's House of Representatives. The one race that we know that was called already, that will include in the 3rd District, Dean Phillips. So, I think, DFLers, we have learned a lot over the last 2 years since that last election. You know what happened in that last election. The Midwest was left behind. Minnesota, it wasn't an easy race that night. But guess what? In 2018, Minnesota is roaring back to say, we are one Minnesota. That is what we are. Because the ballot was more than a ballot this election. There were big stakes and big choices and bigger ideals. Minnesotans, it is early, but it appears to me that Minnesotans voted our dreams and not our fears. We voted for common sense and not blistering words. We voted for getting things done and not gamemanship. And we voted for substance instead of subtweets. We voted for the way politics can be, should be, and with your help will be. And guess what? As we look at, and there are going to be some really tough outcomes tonight, I'm warning you, across the country. Some of my good friends in the Senate, it's going to be a tough night. But then there are going to be these moments of victory that are unbelievable. Like maybe you didn't notice, but we just won with a woman candidate. We beat Chris Kobach for the governorship of Kansas. We did that. We won the governorship in Illinois. We did that. So you are going to see races like Dean's all across the country. Now the work begins. And we're going to hear from a lot more candidates tonight, but I want to tell you what I think we need to do. We have to stand up not just for those who voted for us, but for those who didn't, and for those who stayed at home who were tired of the divisiveness in our politics. Because whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, we are all Minnesotans and we are all Americans. Right now, and you see this when you look at some of the things going on across our country, many people have lost faith in our democracy. And I get why that is. If you turn on TV, it is pretty much a non-stop shout fest between the left and the right, when what we should really be talking about is not what right and left, but what's right and wrong. And we When we hear all that in Minnesota, when you look at what we think the voter turnout, you can see what we did. We didn't just shrug our shoulders this morning when the snow flurries were expected, or when we saw another mean tweet. No, we didn't do that. What did we do? We went out and voted. That's what we do. And by the way, as you saw the lines that I saw today on TV in Arizona, and you heard about what's going on around the country, Minnesota, thanks to Steve Simon and Joan Grow and Mark Ritchie, Minnesota is the model, because we should be making it easier to vote and not harder to vote. And that is why we must pass my bill in Washington, D.C. to register everyone to vote when they turn 18. That's what we must do.
Senator Amy Klobuchar claiming victory at her DFL headquarters this evening. We will be back on television live at 9:25.